This is based on a leak which was sent to us from a guy who is in the United States who sent us the diversity stuff from JP Morgan, which I'm not going to say his name or anything, obviously, but thanks for this, and it is pretty nuts, so I thought we'd go through it. And it's at the highest levels, is the point. So JP Morgan, you can see here the first article, is the CEO taking the knee because the billionaires of the world unite, Black Lives Matter. I mean, it's kind of weird to have the resistance being endorsed by the biggest private bank on the planet, but okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange photo op as well, just outside of a bank vault. Like, I don't know what the imagery is meant to be there.
It's almost like they're dabbing on you. Being like, yeah, we're rich. Get fucked. Anyway, so I looked up JP Morgan because I didn't know this, but they're not only the biggest bank in the world that isn't directly controlled by the CCP, but also they rate their total assets as $3.3 trillion, which is crazy. Like, that's 14% of the US economy.
Wow.
I mean,
they're not all entirely US based, though, are they?
That's no, they're a global organization, but there's a reference for like how much of the. I mean, just one bank.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Anyway, so they're also listed full of controversies because, of course, they're a global international bank, so they've been done for fraud, sanction busting, discrimination situations, or giving $5 billion to the European Super League. So all round not clean, shall we say? But of course,
it's to be expected of any bank.
But they'll take the knee. And well, they'll do anything wrong, won't they? Anyway, but what was interesting is moments after this, apparently the CEO went to a vote about doing a racial equity. I think it was a survey of all of their stuff to make sure that their personnel, if they had a certain race, were being paid a certain amount, because that's totally normal. So he didn't want a racial audit, and he voted against it. So, of course, there are leftists complaining about this, being like, oh, he took the knee, but he doesn't want full communism. So it's easy to write this off as just being, well, okay, it's the billionaires, they'll do the PR thing, and then they won't have anything on the backside. But the leak we got showed that actually it's kind of crazy. Like
as in they're actually buying into it.
Yeah, it's not just a meme for the front of house. Like, they have internal documents in which they are propagandizing their own employees. So they say in here the racial audit, JP Morgan Chase & Co. Chief Executive Jamie Dimon addressed inequality, racism, and corporate responsibility in his annual letter to shareholders on Wednesday morning. Hours later, the JP Morgan board, which he chairs, urged shareholders to vote against the proposal for racial equity audit. So he didn't want that. And let's go to the next one here, because they also give quite a lot of money away for nonsense causes, I'm just going to call it, because there is no way this is going to where the idealized version of where it's going is. So this is JP Morgan pledging $30 billion to help remedy racial wealth gap. Wealth gap. So it doesn't matter what the situation is or how people got that gap. What matters is there is one. Even if it's through all free choice, that doesn't matter. Because, of course, all we care about is race.
So where did they actually donate this then?
They didn't say. They just said they were donating it to different organizations that would help with racial inequality, which is a thing. But yeah, I know about this. Don't worry. So the next thing I wanted to mention was, if you want to know more about this, go to the Ethical Companies podcast we did on this situation, because this guy, the guy who donated 30 billion or gave that order, he's a thief. He is a thief to everyone involved in JP Morgan, the customers and the employees and the shareholders, because he's stolen from all of them by taking that money that is not his to give away and just giving it away on his own personal enjoyment, which is his charitable beings, let's say. He could give his own money away. Probably he gets paid handsomely, so he could give his own salary away to help these organizations. No, he's going to steal from the employees of JP Morgan.
30 billion as well. I imagine that would be a significant pay rise for every single one of them.
Yeah, or you could just spend 30 billion hiring black employees, but it's just piss it away on organizations that are just going to race grift, I guess. So let's play the first clip, which is some of the internal stuff that's been leaked to us. You can see the first one here of them talking about the words they're going to ban within the organization.
However, even the vocabulary we use, some of these things, there has put a new sensitivity around the language we use. Some of this terminology has been used in technology for a long time, whether we're talking about whitelist or blacklists or master slave. We're going to start stripping that out of our vocabulary, as well as things like manpower, looking at this broadly. What can we do? Because sometimes the unintention of how the words that we use can make people feel uncomfortable. And so there are lots of things that we can do.
Did you know someone said the words manpower?
Oh no!
I'm so triggered. This has touched me so deeply. It's so
Also,
ridiculous.
the master and slave system, isn't that like computer programming language? So, or is that offensive to computers?
Yeah, you've offended the computers. So, of course, they've got this kind of nonsense. I wanted to look this up, so I just Googled randomly to see if they had any, let's say, critical race theorists or nut jobs come and speak to them, like every organization. And if you just Google JP Morgan, Robin DiAngelo, you get this, which is the JP Morgan, Chase & Co. Women on the Move, Leadership Day 2020, in which they have them talking about the fact that they invited Robin DiAngelo. They say in here, confirmed speakers include Dr. Robin DiAngelo. Oh, God. And if you don't know anything about her, well, Carl's actually done a talk about this. He went to the German Parliament, which people should check out, The Conservatives' Guide to White Fragility, because our ideology, as she lays out in White Fragility, is indistinguishable from that of a white nationalist. She believes that whiteness and white people are some kind of ubermensch who lord over the non-white people of the world through their sheer existence. It's really weird, but go and check that out. So, of course, they got that. But there's also some other nonsense. So there was a series of internal memos. So this is the first one here, in which it's a message from the global lead for diversity and inclusion. And what's he got to say? So he says that they are collaborating in events to show unity while celebrating our diversity and intersectionality. Great.
So it's explicit then.
Yeah.
They're using their terminology in their internal like emails.
This was sent to everyone around the world in the company as well. So it wasn't just the American branch. But they continue. The firm is making $3 million philanthropic commitment to promote racial and social equality, because that's totally normal, supporting national civil rights organizations that advocate for justice and inclusion, targeted local non-profits and communities disproportionately impacted from COVID-19 pandemic. I was like, that's a lie, for one. You're not interested in whoever's disproportionately impacted from COVID-19, people being locked down by the Democrats. You're more interested in race, as implemented by the latest stuff here, because why else are you going on about race? So, in fact, they're going to be giving that $3 million on the basis of race, which is a totally non-racist thing to do. This is totally normal. This is totally not racist, they swear.
This isn't even any concern of a bank. It's got nothing to do with banking in any way either. Like, what does this have to do with the actual business?
Racial inequality. How did that happen? Like, if you can point to a man who has been discriminated against, such as at JP Morgan, which they got sued for discriminating against black customers, then yeah, you guys can be guilty of that. You can be fined for it. They were. And therefore, that's the resolution. But just there's inequality in the world. That means nothing to a liberal or a conservative. The only person who would care about such a thing is a socialist, because that is what they care about.
So they're kind of pandering to cover up for the fact that they were prosecuted for supposedly discriminating against black.
I'd like to think it was just
customers.
a cope, but I don't think it is. I think they actually have, like most other companies in the Western world, brought into this garbage. And I'm sure these people are getting paid handsomely for their contribution, shall we say. But they continue. Locally, we are taking steps to restore branches and communities directly impacted as a result of the riots. What riots? Those are peaceful protests. They're mostly peaceful protests. Why would you need to go in there and restore the branches with the communities? Against the riots.
At least they called them riots. There's some shred of something there.
Yeah, but no, I guess they're racist for pointing out the obvious, which is the George Floyd riots caused a lot of deaths and a lot of damage. And they continue. We are matching employee contributions 2-1, made to select organizations that have a long history of supporting justice and inclusion. I want to thank our employees who have already shown their support by donating more than $373,000 as of Friday. So they'll be donating $2 to 1 for whatever.
So not only are they donating, 30 billion, they're also getting their employees to donate.
And the $3 million they just threw out there.
Yeah, so
And
not
also,
only did they take that money from their employees, they're also encouraging the employees to take it out of their own wage as well.
Yeah, give us back your wages so we can give it away as donations and then get a tax rebate, presumably. It's just a scum thing to do.
Why are they doing this?
Because leftism. That's always the point. There's racial inequality. That means nothing. Did the inequality arise through maltreatment? And then you have an argument. If you don't, then you're just a communist. That's all it is. Sorry. Like, no one caused the black guy to get less wages than the other guy. Like, if they made their job decisions and one got paid more than the other, that's not discrimination. That's a fact of life. Anyway, same with the wage gap between men and women, of course. So the funniest thing in here is they wanted this moment of silence for Big Floyd. Which,
Is that what we're calling him now?
I guess so. They say in here, moment of silence. We're inviting all employees to join a firm-wide moment of silence on Tuesday, June 9th at 8:46 a.m. Eastern Time. Moment of silence, though. Like, the kind of thing we do for November the 11th for the fallen in the Great Wars and every war since. So I guess it's all in the fallen of the Great Race War. The day and time are significant, they say, as they represent the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that George Floyd was pinned to the ground. We ask that you and your teams dictate at least 1 minute and pause meetings not to conduct business, transactions, and refrain from using emails or having calls, which sounds a bit cultish, but whatever. This moment of silence represents our solidarity with the black community and commitment to stamp out racism wherever we can. Why? There's no racial aspect to George Floyd's killing. There is none. There was none alleged in the courtroom. There was none alleged by the defense or the prosecution. What there was alleged is by BLM, a Marxist organization that endorses the Cuban communist regime. I don't know how this lie has traveled so far that even in a company of billionaires...
I know. Whenever George Floyd is mentioned, we have to always repeat that the court case had no racial element whatsoever.
Not even alleged.
No. I mean, it would have damaged their case, wouldn't it? Because there's no proof. You can't prove what's in someone's head in a courtroom. That's 1984 territory.
It's just the BLM position of, well, cop was white, man who died was black, therefore racism. It's like, right.
It's the only answer.
If we switch it around, cop is black, man on the floor who dies is white, is this now still racism? Of course not. Well, then you don't care about racism. There is no racial aspect. You're a liar. You're a grifter. That's all it was for BLM. And I'm eternally surprised by how no one's figured this out. Like, this lie just carries on and on. They also rattle on about how they have a duty to propagandize their employees because they're managers. No, you can propagandize your employees if you want, but you don't have a duty to unless you're a member of a comrade in some kind of war. So if you're a liberal, then you want to promote liberalism, then you'd have a duty to propagate liberal values throughout the company. But that's not what's going on here. You're propagating socialist values because you're talking about like racial equality, for example. Not equal treatment, but instead the wage gap between black and white people, which is what a hell of a thing to talk about. In which case you think of yourself as a comrade in the race war, presumably, because I don't know what else they could be talking about here. So let's go for the diversity course that they set out, which is also really funny. So this is the first image in which they have their confidentiality statement, and you have to ask why. Why are they so concerned? This material may not be copied, shared, or distributed to anyone other than an employee. Any unauthorized use or distribution may result in disciplinary action for employees up to and including termination.
Funny that they've included that. It's almost like they've seen what has happened to other workplaces and seen their employees releasing the diversity stuff, which has been really bad PR for a lot of those companies. And now they're saying anyone who does this is going to be disciplined.
Coca-Cola. Be less white. I mean, yeah, it's a big PR disaster to see this extreme leftist nonsense promoted by mainstream companies. And they're taking note of that, I assume, and being like, yeah, don't tell anyone. And in case you're wondering why they're saying don't tell anyone, we can go to the next image. This is one of the slides in which the head of diversity and inclusion is explaining himself. And in here he says, we'll be exploring key terms like diversity, inclusion, privilege, microaggressions, and unconscious bias. It's important that we understand these terms so we can, quote, speak the same language and establish a solid foundation upon which we can communicate. Right, so they're dog whistles. That's what they are. They're leftist dog whistles. Because you never hear rightists talk like this. You only ever hear leftists talk like this. Microaggressions. I mean, the nonsense of college campuses.
Yeah, and unconscious bias as well. Because we did a podcast about that, didn't we? Where we were talking about all of the science that is against it and how it doesn't work because you can't consciously change your unconscious because your conscious and unconscious are two different things. And it doesn't make sense. So trust the science. Unconscious bias training is a load of rubbish.
But my opinion in here is he's laying out his position, which is this is the reason they didn't want it to go public, is like with Coca-Cola, when it does go public, they get embarrassed by the fact that you're promoting far-left ideology, in which case, why are you promoting it? Like, if you're
just
so
don't do it in the first place.
If you're so embarrassed, why do you do it? You know it's bad. That's why. So, indoctrinating your employees into leftist terminology so they can have a language of their own in which they can communicate with each other on the basis, hey, fellow leftist. Yeah, that's a bad thing to do. Anyway, if we go to the next image, there's all the microaggressions. I thought you could read some of these and just have a laugh because I need a drink.
commenting that a person speaks excellent English isn't that a compliment? I mean,
It's a microaggression, mate.
If I say to Hugo, you speak excellent English, surely that's a compliment that he's diligent in his learning of a second language.
No, you're fired. How dare you be this insulting? There's other stuff here, so interrupting a co-worker to say what you are trying to say is... I was like, okay, well, Kathy Newman's fired then. Calling a female co-worker sweetheart. Calling transgender employee, saying to a transgender employee, no one can tell you are trans.
Everyone can tell is fine.
That's okay, but saying no one can tell, that's a microaggression there.
Everyone knows you're a man. You can't hide it.
God. Yeah,
apparently that's fine.
Telling a co-worker that they're too sensitive.
How can, in like a banking environment as well, like surely that's important where there's lots of money at stake. Saying you're too sensitive to criticism is a valid thing to say to someone.
I love the idea as well. Like you think of bankers. I mean, what do you think of? Stockbrokers and all that financial world. You think of Wall of Wall Street, and you think of them all taking coke and doing drugs,
carrying around big piles of cash.
Yeah,
everywhere.
partying till 4 a.m. with clients to get them to sign some stupid deal that's going to make them take all their money. And you think, like, imagine being that guy who's taking drugs and doing all that partying and coming into work, and then having to learn about critical race theory. You're just like, right, I did not work this hard to do this. Anyway, you mentioned about the unconscious bias training nonsense, which is, as I think you read this article. I can't remember. If we go to the next one, they banned this. The UK government banned this for being nonsense, rightfully.
I did write this, yeah.
Yeah, because it's pseudoscience. It doesn't work, even for the thing it's trying to obtain, which is Thetan levels for racism. Which
it doesn't even. Not only does it not work, practically speaking, like a philosophical level and a theoretical level, it doesn't work either, because the whole reason the unconscious is because it's beyond our control. So if it's beyond our control, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, pretty much.
I also love it. This is just a billionaire company, $1 trillion company actually, $1 trillion bank that's buying into this stuff. It really does go to the highest levels, doesn't it? Anyway, so I thought we'd just go on to the next one here, which is just an example of why it's so nonsensical, which I found recently. Harvard University decided to do a study of implicit bias between different countries about how they associated the term dark skin, and they rated it with more negative thoughts to more positive thoughts. Do you know who's the least racist country according to this logic?
We are?
Serbia.
Okay, that was not what I expected. Well, that's interesting.
For any non-Europeans, Serbia, most well known for genocide in the last few decades, in which they just started killing all their neighbors because, well, they wanted independence and therefore are different and therefore they die because they're the wrong ethnic group. They're the least racist people in the country according to implicit bias tests from Harvard University.
Apparently they thought highly of them, though.
Yeah, that doesn't tell you anything about the racism of each country. That just tells you that Harvard University believes in bunk. If they're actually publishing this and being like, hey, we found that Serbia is the least racist country, whilst they're all singing Ne volim te alia, Santos Osi... Not going to finish that one. Anyway, some people will get that joke.
I have no idea what
anyway,
about.
So let's go end this with just a dump on the BBC, because why not? Because you put this in the chat a while back, which is the BBC Bite Size putting the Equality and Social Justice article out, in which they were trying to propagandize kids believing in equality and social justice. They define equality as when each person is seen as equal in the eyes of the law. No, that's equality under the law, not equality in and of itself. Social justice is when a person can exercise their rights within a society. No,
what?
No, it's not.
Social justice is now just liberalism. Okay.
Yeah, because you have equality before the law. Okay, because you got equality. Equality on its own is just the same. Equality before the law, same treatment before the law. Equality on its own is everyone must be the same. So they're getting that wrong. But also, that's required because equality before the law performs justice, produces justice, and that is antithetical to social justice, ergo the per of social in front. Because social justice requires that you look at the percentage of people in prison and then determine whether or not this person is going to prison. You look at the percentage of, say, black murderers, and then decide whether or not this person should go to jail, because is that social justice? They're disproportionately represented in the prison system, therefore they're guilty or not guilty.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, which is why it's garbage, but BBC wants to indoctrinate our kids into this. But whatever, it's a kids' article, so they could just be overly simplifying.
I imagine not many kids read the BBC stuff anyway.
No.
I know I certainly didn't when I was younger.
It's just for leftists to indoctrinate their kids. But anyway, the discrimination section here as well I found funny. The problem is when we discriminate against people too often, people are discriminated against because of who they are. They may suffer from unemployment, lower wages, abuse, or violence because of their gender, race, religion, or sexuality. Coming from the BBC, the organization that discriminates on the basis of race for the application of jobs. If we go to the next one, you can see here, this is something we noted before. BBC, this opportunity is only open to people from underrepresented backgrounds. So it's the second image here for the BBC. Yeah. This opportunity is only open to black, Asian, and ethnically diverse candidates. This was for a research job. It's not on-screen talent. You're not playing Anne Boleyn, so you don't have to be black. Don't worry about it. This is just for behind the scenes. The BBC openly discriminates against white people, and at the same time it's like, hey, racism bad. You shouldn't.
It's clearly just to bump up their numbers and to look good in the eyes of the progressives, right?
Yeah, this isn't the first time either. If we go to the next one, there's the trainee situation they had before as well. So this was I think it was a radio, BBC Radio. You wanted to go and get a traineeship with them. They also banned white applicants. I emailed them about this when it happened, and they just wrote back to me being like, we stand by it. Like, people have no shame.
Don't expect them to double down when you're asking them about it.
Yeah, do you endorse racism? Yes, says the BBC. Aha, okay. So there's also not this, but the last thing I wanted to end on was something, I didn't know where to put it, but I just have to mention it because it's really weird, is the ITV. So after someone said the N-word online, presumably Indonesians and Indians, about the football, the ITV, Good Morning Britain show, decided to read out a message from a 9-year-old saying racism bad.
Oh no, we're not going to watch it, are we?
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
and then they break down crying about the whole thing because it's so touching. There's 9-year-olds saying racism bad, which is a stunning and brave thing to say. They also say here about privilege. You're privileged if you don't have to think about it. Let's play.
There is a letter online from a 9-year-old called Dexter. And Marcus tweeted it along with his statement. And it says, Dear Marcus Rashford, I hope you won't be sad for long because you are such a good person. Last year, you inspired me to help those less fortunate. I hope Marcus feels everything that's coming through from this letter and from all the messages of support.
so profound.
Then last night you inspired me again to always be brave. I'm proud of you. You'll always be a hero. It's hideous. What
That's England.
That's England.
Isn't it? Dexter's England, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
And Marcus Rashford and Tyrone Mings and Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka and every single member of that squad.
Now, look here, Ravi, you've got to read the news, so dry your eyes.
No, the thing is, it goes to the heart of what we want for our children. My son going to school, he's talked about racism that he's faced. He's going to be 9 this...
He's 9 as well?
Yeah, but you think about it all the time. And you're privileged if you don't have to think about it. And the only time you think about it is when one of your heroes is suffering.
Yeah. That's the definition.
Right? That's the
of white
definition of privilege.
Right.
Yeah, that's privilege when you don't have to think about it. It's weird how 2 grown presenters have broken down crying after reading a 9-year-old saying racism bad. But the ITV, you don't have to think about your race unless you're got brown skin, and therefore that's evidence of white privilege. Except ITV, as shown earlier, are also an organisation that discriminate against white people applying for jobs. I just can't get over the utter hypocrisy of the thing, being like, we're going to do a big segment on racism bad, and also at the same time, F white people who apply for jobs in our organisation. Crocodile tears. I can't. That's why I want to show this, not because it's particularly special, but just the utter patheticness of crying about racism bad on the show, and at the same time saying to applicants who apply for your jobs, we will discriminate on the basis of race. Truly progressive.
If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 PM UK time on lotuseaters.com.